Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Couple of Nukes. As always, I'm your host, Mr. Whiskey. And honestly, reflecting on it, the past few weeks, I've had a couple reunion episodes, which is awesome. One of the things I love the most about podcasting is the community, the networking, meeting people. And we as entrepreneurs do so much that having an episode with someone a year later is you're like, wow, I can't believe they did all that stuff. I haven't done that much stuff in 10 years,
Mm.
sometimes and others, we're just slowly growing, doing our thing. But yeah, I wanted to invite Mr. Noah May back on to go over some new podcasts that he launched, all the interviews he's been doing, the growth of Lethal Venom from the new logo, which is amazing looking, by the way, to just how life has been. So, Mr. Bay, if you could please tell us a little bit about yourself, especially for those of us who didn't catch your last episode, who you are and what you're doing.
So, I'm Noah May. I'm 24. I'm a year older since we've started doing our last episode. I got a year older, and I am the host of three podcasts now. I do Lethal Venom. I do Music Talks now, which is still kind of getting a revamp. But Southern Reads also has relaunched that, and since then, there's been a lot of change that we'll probably get into going on forward. But I graduated from Auburn with my bachelor's in journalism, so I have a four-year college degree with that. And yeah, since then I've just still been doing podcasting. I've had some projects happen that have been kind of that have launched and some that I'm still working on personally. So there's been a lot that's happened in the past year, which is crazy. So I'm excited to kind of share and give updates about what's been going on with me in the podcast world.
For sure, a year older and a year wiser. Hopefully. Hopefully that's the plan.
Yeah.
We don't want to go backwards, but you talk about one of your podcasts is book related. You're doing all these interviews. You got the journalism degree. Are you secretly writing a book?
Um, yes and no. I was Well, since our last interview, I had two people reach out to me. One, what her name's Vanessa. I don't know if you've heard of her, or I actually got recommended through her from Pete, which I think we know Pete versus anxiety.
Yeah, so you're
Um,
talking about Vanessa the Vivacious, Humanity 2.0, right?
yes, sir. She reached out to me. We kind of were on each other's podcasts and we did kind of interviews on each other's, and asked me to write a section for a book that she's coming out with called, I don't know if we can say the title yet, but she's coming out with a book that she's asked me to have a feature story in there. So she reached out to me, and I'm been currently writing it. So been working on that. So I kind of am writing a book, but it's just kind of a short section. And then I had another woman reach out to me, Adrienne Baker. She hosts a podcast. I have to pull it up. I can't remember. I've done so many shows and whatnot.
Yeah, yeah.
I get names and all that mixed up. But she wanted to have my episode featured in a book that she was coming out with that was focused on mental health. So she had asked me if it was okay if my episode was featured in there, and I said absolutely, that's no problem. So I've been asked to have two in there, but personally having like writing like a full-on memoir or something, that's not on the to-do list yet. I'm pretty sure later on, maybe if I get bored enough, I'll do it. But so far, I've just been asked to do kind of sections in there. So
Yeah, well, that's always a good stepping stone. It takes a lot of pressure off of you about all this publishing stuff. You just write your chapter, turn it in, and yeah, it's funny. When I first started podcasting, it's like I knew every guest exact story and name and I could tell you everything. And now I'm at 300 plus episodes, and sometimes I'm like, this will sound really bad, but I'll be honest. Sometimes there's a guest that I just completely forget. But then as soon as I see their picture, their name, I'm like, oh yeah, of course I know who that is, and I can tell their episode
mm,
and stuff. But it's like Not only that, but I've also guested on many shows. I guested on I think over 50 shows now across the world. So it all blends together. Especially, I'm sure you've had days where I've had days where I do back-to-back episodes, or
Mm,
some people it's very late at night or very early in the morning. Listen, if you're podcasting with me and it's like midnight my time and 9 p.m. your time, I'm gonna forget half of it. We're still gonna show up. We're still gonna make it happen. But yeah, it's
yeah.
definitely blending together. And this is on top of all the in-person conferences, all the online Zoom meetings and other groups that I'm a part of. So it's hard. But everyone remembers me. They're like, oh yeah, the guy with the cowboy hat, Mr. Whiskey. And it's like, oh, why do I have to be so memorable? Sometimes it's good to just not be that memorable because then I go to conferences and people are like, Mr. Whiskey, we met 3 years ago. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, that's 3 years ago is a really long time in terms of podcasting. I don't, yeah.
Yeah.
But luckily the anyone who's been on my show more than once, I got you down pretty down pat. So yeah, but you talked about I don't know how many episodes you're at now, but it's been a while since you launched Lethal Venom as your main podcast platform. How has the journey really been shaping with that, in terms of feedback, in terms of how you personally feel? Have you been called to change kind of the direction of it? How is it expanding and growing?
Well, really, when we first last talked, it was kind of at, I think at that point I had done, I don't even think 100 episodes yet. I mean, it was still pretty new. I looked and we did our interview back in August, and that was right about month or two after I was on PodMatch, and I was still kind of getting the swing of things in. I think a little after we did our interview, it just went skyrocketed and it's just been up here for the whole time. I've done, I have actually recorded about 500 episodes since then. I
Wow.
do literally interviews every day. I've got to say, it's kind of slimmed back a little bit. It's kind of been like a little bit of weighing about guests and whatnot. I've had some guests not show up, which I'm pretty sure we've all encountered. That's
Hmm.
frustrating, but um, it's kind of gotten a little slow on doing interviews, which I'm so far behind on posting. I'm kind of thankful for it because I can get caught up. But I've been doing that, and I've really gotten a lot of positive feedback from it. I've not had really much negativity come from it, which is kind of shocking because I thought at this point I would have had like um some criticism for it. I know for Apple podcasts, I've had people, I think 46 people leave a review for me on Apple Podcasts, which is out astonishing to see. Spotify has kind of like I said, someone did leave kind of a low rating on one that kind of bumped my score down to like 4.6. So I'm like, I don't know. So
Yeah.
that's that kind of the only negative feedback I've received, but it's still like really good compared to some other big podcasts out there. So really, it's just been overwhelmingly positive. I've not had anyone give like any negative feedback, which I'm thankful for. And a lot of my guests love the podcast that they come on. So overall, it's still been really overall positive.
Yeah, and you got to take the Spotify with a grain of salt because I would say for every 10 Apple Podcast reviews I get, maybe there's one person who's on Spotify and it's only a star rating as far as I know. I don't think you can even leave a written review. So, I'll be honest, I never even checked my rating on Spotify before because I always look at Apple Podcasts because that's my main platform. And you know the frustration of, man, if every guest left a review, how much greater, right? You'd be at 500 reviews, it's like, and I don't know. I always review the podcast I'm on for the most part. It's like it's not that hard to do, but it's okay. It's okay. Some
Yeah.
people are just it is what it is. But yeah, those reviews. I mean, they say cherish your first 1-star review because having enemies mean you're doing good work. But at the same time, it's like, yeah, well, if no one ever dislikes it, that's good too. I've had my fair share of different comments on YouTube or stuff like that. And sometimes it's not about you, it's about the content and not even the content quality, but the subject. So, like, I posted a discussion on men's mental health, suicide, grief, and all that. And within 45 minutes of that video being out on YouTube, it got disliked. Not even by someone who, to my knowledge, watched the full video. They just saw the topic. They're like, oh, we hate this. And anytime I post anything faith-based or mention Jesus Christ, it gets dislikes on YouTube. Certain topics of domestic violence or human trafficking get dislikes, which that's just evil people. If you hate domestic violence prevention and awareness, obviously your dislike doesn't really mean much to me. It's sad. I mean, it's disheartening to I had
Yeah.
like pro human trafficking comments on one of my on a YouTube short I posted, and it's like, yeah, yeah. That's why my comments on Instagram, you can only comment if you follow me, because I don't have time for all the trolls and BS and all the negativity and racism and sexualism and hatred that Instagram and X and those platforms kind of specialize in more than, Facebook and LinkedIn is pretty tame. But yeah. So what would you say? I know you interview such a wide variety of people. In the 500 episodes, I mean, you're recording every day. Are you weekly? Are you bi-daily or daily? Like, how frequently are you dropping these episodes? Or is this just a big backlog? You're like, I'm gonna take the year off. No more interviews. Just gonna slowly release it.
Well, honestly, I felt bad for having being so far behind. I'll be real honest. When I first started doing PodMatch and learned about, you get paid to do interviews, that money side of me was like, that was like a really bad drug I really got. So I was like doing 7, 8 interviews a day that are like hour-long interviews in which, sometimes I don't even go the full hour, but even sometimes I go over the full hour. So it was just like I was really wanting a lot of those interviews for the money side of it. I will be honest, I kind of got hooked on that and was like, it's a great tool. Well, I've only posted about not even 200 episodes yet, but I have like over 400 in the thing. So it's good to have a backlog like that. So in case something does go wrong, I have episodes backed up. But it also is like people have waited for so long for an episode to come out. And I've had some people that are like very understanding. They said, look, I understand all what you go through. I'm just a person that comes on and speaks. I don't have a podcast myself. Some people are understanding and some people are not. They feel like that they should have that episode come out within 24 hours of you recording.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, well, think about times that by like 300. That's probably when your episode will come out. But I think a lot of I did a lot. I think I took editing a little bit too seriously too, because I would like record like an hour-long episode, go back and sit through that full hour listening to it again, and not really making any tweaks. But I do a lot of precise editing too. I really took this podcast for because at the time this was my child. It was my only baby that was kind of keeping me from having to go
Right.
out and do like a full-time job. It was kind of a way for me to be able to work from home and do this. So I took this podcast really seriously, and I think I took it a little too seriously looking hindsight at it. Now it's weekly. I try to at least post one, but I've gotten to where now I'm just posting them without doing much editing at all, just to kind of get caught up because I think I got that too much stress of like people have waited for so long, and I'm understanding too. Like I've done podcasts where I've done it last year and they're not even come out yet, but I don't forcefully be like, "Where's my episode? Where's my episode? Where's my episode?" So I try not to be that kind of person because I understand that you run multiple shows, you are one man crew. It takes a long time for an episode to come out.
Yeah.
So I try to not be that person, but it's so hard. And I've had to be ugly with some people too. I've had some guests come on that are not unruly guests. Like since then, I've had some kind of minor horror stories of guests I've had to deal with that are just difficult to work with.
Mm.
And I try to keep a positive attitude because, this is kind of a reputation thing. Oh, but it's so hard sometimes for my mouth not to get the best of me. I'm just like,
Yeah.
y'all are testing me today. But I do try to post weekly now, and I've gotten to where I try to post multiple times. I just maybe cut dead parts out and then post it because I've gotten to that point of like, I can't keep doing what I was doing.
Yeah. Well, and that's I don't want to say a phase, but it's a part of the journey for every podcaster, myself included. I used to spend, a long time editing, doing every and this was before, now we've got some good AI tools to help out with that. But yeah, this was, manually editing, and I would, watch every episode back and edit it, which means it's even longer. If you're watching and editing an hour-long episode, it'll probably take you 2 to 3 hours because you're pausing, you're replaying, you're pausing, and it really does take a lot of time. And so when you have as many episodes as you do, yeah, I just had to kind of slow down with that as well. I know some people are like, it's important to edit, of course, major changes and stuff, and the more you edit, the more time you can save. And sometimes with podcasting, it is a battle for how short you can make the episode because of retention and engagement to that degree. What I'll say is I totally relate to the frustration of your episode not coming out because I am hey, I'm eager to promote this, to make social media clips from it, to share it. And, I've had some people where I recorded, I think the longest was 9 months. I recorded and it didn't come out till 9 months later. And I can understand it is really frustrating, but I also know that, like, hey, there's nothing I can do about it. They've got this backlog and they record, and a lot of times when the host records every single day with people, I'm expecting, like, hey, it's going to be a while. The only time I'll reach out is there's a few hosts that I'm like, hey, you never put an estimated release date, or it's been a long time, and like, you said it would be out in a few weeks. It's been a few months, a few weeks versus a few months. So I've followed up with a few people. Sometimes people just forget to tell you that the episode is released, and it's gotten to the point where I've been on so many different shows that I can't keep going back every single day and checking every single one of them to be like, did it come out yet? As a good host, you tell your guest when the episode is out. And me personally, I send the link to Apple Podcasts and YouTube. I say, hey, the episode's out, I'm promoting it, blah, blah, blah. But yeah. And then in terms of guests that are, as you call them, difficult to work with, I've had my fair share as well. You mentioned earlier no shows. Me and Chris Milson in a recent episode talked about that and how frustrating and discouraging it can be, especially he and I have both experienced, and maybe you've experienced as well, back to back no shows or multiple no shows, in a row. That's really
Mm,
disheartening. For me, the worst has been like canceling plans or rescheduling or changing my schedule to accommodate a podcast and then rescheduling last minute or canceling, especially because people say, well, didn't you block that day off for work? For me, it's like I'm available from these hours to these hours any day for a podcast. But then that day will be unbooked for weeks. And then like 2 days beforehand, people will be like, "Oh, I've decided I'm going to podcast on this day." I'm like, "You got kidding me?" Like I'm going to do it, but I was low key hoping no one would book for that spot. And I had to change it because it used to be just like 24 hours notice. I'm like, I need 3 days. Okay, I can't just have people booking for tomorrow morning and it's only 24 hours away. I had to structure my
mm,
calendar to be reasonable, reasonable. And I changed it where like, hey, I'm only doing a maximum of maybe 3 or 4 podcasts a day because I've done, like you mentioned, doing 7 or 8 in a day, all over an hour long. You get mentally exhausted. You get tired, your body's cramped, your eyes hurt. I mean, because you're just sitting there. interviewing, most of the time listening and listening. And I tell you, like the day I did 10 hours straight of podcasting, each episode was slightly shorter than the last. And the last episode was like, we went from an hour and a half episodes to the last one was like 45 minutes. I'm like, I'm going to bed, so it's tiring. I know compared to some other jobs, our complaints are very, minuscule compared to what other people go through, but it is some of the
Right.
difficulties. And I'm curious, have you had issues with when you talk about difficult guests? Is it guests who talk too much, who don't really have any answers? Is it people just wanting to promote a product or a service and not actually share an impactful story? Or what kind of difficulties are we talking about? Without name dropping every single one of them. When we get
Um,
off the call, you and I can talk about who it is because we probably have recorded with them both.
if I remember who they were.
Yeah.
This has been so they come very few and far between. I'll be honest, they have been very few and far between. I mean,
Well,
every
that's
person
good.
that I've interviewed has been respectful and they've been fantastic guests. The I've had though a few. There was one that I interviewed and actually posted. I posted because the interview wasn't bad. He just talked for a very long time. And one of the big rules about journalism that we learned is that you don't interrupt people. I thought you've got to take a breath of air or something. I think they talked for about an hour and a half straight, and I thought
Wow.
I'm just sitting here just nodding, and when I'm trying to like butt in an answer, I've got to say easiest episode to edit because it was just like sitting here just listening to it. But I've had worse. I've had a little bit more. I had a guest come on that worked for a company, and it seemed like he had to have everything run by the boss, and everything had to be approved by him. I I think he got confused and thinking that we were doing the actual interview that day, which it was kind of hard because I didn't do really pre-interviews like I do now. I said, "Well, we're doing the main interview today. I thought we were doing it today." And he told me that he had to get permission through his boss, and I thought, "Really? You have to get permission through your boss?" That was kind of where I was honest. I said, "Honestly, you don't need to have permission. It's your time to be on my show. I don't need so and so's permission of like, can he be on my show today? Yes or no." It's more of like, you know your schedule, you know what you need to do. It kind of made me mad because I thought, and I told the boss that I said, you don't have right to be able to be like controlling him of what he needs to be doing and what his schedule is. It's his show, it's not your time. So I got a little, the May in me was like, we have family history where the May in us comes out. The May in me came out that day. It just made me so mad because I thought he was a good guest because I thought he had like an interesting story. He had a wonderful business that he had. His boss was just too controlling over everything. And I just felt very upset from it. And I told them, I said, I'm not having everything run by him. He's not, his name's not on the interview name. His name's not going to be in the episode title. It's not even going to be in the description box. I don't want to have my interview run, but it was like, oh, controlling my whole interview process of like, this is when you're going to edit. This is what you're going to tell him. And I thought, no, I thought your name's not on my show. And so he's been the worst one I've worked with. And then I had a guest come on way back like last year, and I think this was after we had done our interview. Um, it was a woman that had come on PodMatch. Well, I messaged her directly and said, I want you to be on the show. I typically was the one that sent my messages out to everyone. And she said, well, I don't think I'll be a good fit for your show, but this other person that I have would be a good fit. And I thought, I read through the whole thing of like, well, do you have like a website for them? Do they have a PodMatch profile? Do they have any kind of profile that I can look through? And I think she gave me a few examples of like, I think I was not prepared at all for this interview. When I started hit record, I thought, I'm not prepared. I don't have anything to go off of. I don't know who you are. I don't know what you do. And so I didn't post that interviews. Out of all 500 I've recorded, that's the only one I've never posted. Well, they started getting kind of like, where's your episode and all this stuff. And I told him honestly, I said, well, honestly, I wasn't prepared enough for the interview process at all and wasn't prepared. He wasn't a bad guest by all means. It was just poor communication on their part. And they were like, well, it's real tacky that you did an interview and didn't even post it or anything. I said, well, one, I was not prepared for it, so it wasn't a good interview to begin with. Two, when it came to promoting, I had no social platforms for him to be promoted on. I had no website to go off of really, and told them honestly about it. And it kind of got put to rest for about a month. Well, about a month later, I get another email from him from another person that said, when's this episode coming out? And I said, well, I told his assistant or owner or whoever was over him about the whole situation. They got mad at me over that. And I thought, well, it's y'all's fault for not having that cross communication going on. So I've had two instances, and I'll be honest, when it comes to assistants, if I lost my hair due to assistants, I'd be bald. I hate talking to assistants. It's one thing. I've had some awful, and I don't know how you uh what your protocol is with assistants, but every time I see like I'm an assistant for so and so, I'm like, have to take an Advil because I'm just like, okay. I had one person to come up to me and I said, by the way, I said, I loved how you messaged me on PodMatch. And they said, I don't have a PodMatch profile. And I thought, hold on. Oh, wait a minute. And I said, so you're telling me that I haven't been talking to you during this whole time? Because I was like using first person pronouns and they use like first person pronouns of like, I would love to be on your show. This is who I am. My name's so and so, and I own this thing. So I thought, oh, I'm talking to the guest. Well, come to find out, I was talking to his assistant. And I thought, how'd she get hired? I literally told him on the call, I said, I'm telling you this from experience. Your assistant doesn't need to be doing that because what it's going to showcase to all these other podcasters is that they're talking to you directly. They're setting up questions, they're setting up all these times. And so I told him, I said, you better talk to your assistant now and say, why are you using first person pronouns like I, me, and all this stuff? Why you're not using third person pronouns? Because people are thinking or assuming that it's me messaging and not you directly saying like, hey, I'm so and so's assistant. I thought, how dumb. Honestly, when he said that, I was taken aback. I was like shocked at just that. And I thought, oh my God, how stupid can you be? And I was like, no, it wasn't his fault, but I thought, how did you not know either too? So I've had
Mm,
some interesting
right.
things podcasting. So I don't know how you've been with assistants, but I've had some really bad ones. I've had maybe one or two that have been good.
It can definitely be a pain point. One thing I will say on PodMatch's behalf is a lot of times it will automatically inform you if it was booked through a publishing or other third entity party. However, if an assistant does just make the profile, then it's up to them to notify you. I'll say most of them have reached out and said, I am reaching out on behalf of Noah May, and my name is so and so. And if you need anything, you'll be contacting me. A majority of them have informed you of that. Well, and that's the professional and proper thing to say, hey, I'm reaching out on behalf of this person. What I'll say is, I guess the most irritating thing is I have found that if the podcast is booked through an assistant or a publishing company or a promotion company, that is the highest rate of no-shows. And I don't know if it's a thing where I don't know. But historically the most no-shows have been when the guests themselves had it booked through an assistant or whatever it is, and maybe they don't look at their email or the assistant forgets to put it in the email or whatever it has been. Historically, those have been the most no-shows. Most of the time, they're like, I didn't know I had a podcast today. Like, what do you mean? Like, your assistant
Right.
didn't tell you? I mean, we
Hmm.
planned this out weeks ago or days ago or months ago. It's never a thing where their assistant is like, "Oh, let's throw a podcast onto their schedule tomorrow," right? Usually it's booked in advance. And that has been the
Right.
most annoying part.
Hmm.
And one example I shared, I actually reached out to Alex Sanfilippo, the founder of PodMatch, about this one. There was a specific promotion company on PodMatch reached out to me with 5 different guests in one day. And every single guest was a New York chiropractor, a New York City chiropractor. And I guess this promotion company specifically did chiropractors. And I was like, man, I will do these 5 interviews, but they got to be spaced out. I can't just do 5 chiropractor episodes in a row. I think people are going to think I'm a couple of chiropractors, not a couple of nukes. So,
Right.
I
Hmm.
had all of them were no-shows in a row. And I reached out to Alex. I was like, hey, man, the chances of all 5 of them blowing me off at once in terms of not showing up compared to the chance that this promotion company didn't tell all 5 of them that they had an interview, who do you think is at fault? I said, what are the chances that 5 people all were like, I'm not showing up to the podcast today? I said it's more likely that the group that booked all 5 of them did not
Hmm.
cross communicate well, which is what we were talking about earlier. Cross communication is so important. And I have found, yeah, I like assist, and for me, if I have an assistant, I want to know everything you're doing. If you're making accounts on my behalf, I want to review them first to make sure that they're accurate. A lot of people outsource and just trust it. And I have actually been to events, I won't name drop, but one of the biggest disappointments is like they outsourced the t-shirts, I believe, to their assistant who misspelled a word on the shirts. And I look back at the photos and everyone's shirt, the name of the event has a typo in it, and I've seen stuff like that. I've seen assistants spell people's name wrong or get the information wrong. And there's nothing wrong with outsourcing, right? But there has to be a level of trust and review of quality of work. You have to build that relationship first. You can't just hire an assistant and be like, all right, here's what you're doing, go free. Like you should work first. And that's why they always say, like, you should go through the process of editing your own videos first before you outsource. So you know what you want and have a feel for what is being done. And yeah, I think it's definitely been a pain point for me. I don't know if I've gotten into too many arguments with assistants, and if I have, it's definitely because like the no-show thing is really upsetting. Because when it's not the person's fault and it's their assistant's fault, it's like, come on, like your job, you're getting paid to inform this person that you're booking them on podcasts. But I have found that's the highest rated no-show is if someone books through a third party company or assistant. But when the guest themselves says, hey, I want to be on your show and I'm gonna do it, they'll show up because they put in the time and effort. And I have found that people wanting to do the manual work of promoting themselves are pretty committed to the craft. Not to say that I have 100% show up rate, that. And one of the things
Hmm.
you talked about too was, um, yeah, just difficult guests, having guests who were long-winded. I think about an hour response was one of my guests. A different guest was about a 45-minute response. One of the worst ones was actually I had a guest who's like, hey, I want to come on a podcast. I've got this message I want to share. Or I had 2 people. First one was like, I want to share a message. I want to be a podcast guest. Okay, yeah, come on the show. Kind of gave me an idea of what they want to talk about. We were done in
Hmm.
9 minutes. 9 minutes. They were like, I don't have anything more to say. That's message is pretty straightforward. I was like, I understand, but as a podcast guest, like we need at least 15 minutes. And so I had to really think of some questions to keep the conversation going. And usually with podcasting, it's the opposite. Usually the guest has too much to say. This was, yeah, I'm done. I was like, that was your message? It's been 9 minutes. And it's good to be able to say your message compactly, but not for long form content, you know?
Right.
And so
Mm,
that was probably one of the most flexible moments I have had in my podcasting career where I had to be like, hey, we got to make this interview work somehow, and we got to think of some questions. And it was also a subject where I could only say so much too, right? It's not like I can just fill in and the and then it makes me look like a bad host too if it's 9 minutes of him talking and then 30 minutes of me talking, right? So you got to
mm.
balance it. So I've had my fair share of that. I think the worst story was I had a guest who showed up, didn't know the name of the podcast and didn't know who I was, and had just been reaching out to podcasts as billets to guest on to promote his new program. And I kind of mentioned that earlier to you. Some people are just using it as a pitch fest, a promote fest. And it's fine if you want to promote a service, a business, a book, but you have to make impactful content for the whole podcast episode. And yeah, that guy's interview. That was early on, one of the first few guests I had, so I was in that phase where I felt obligated to release, and I'm sure you are similar. And after a while, you're like, I'm not obligated to release anything. If you're a bad guest or was a bad interview, it's my right, and that's what it says in my guest contract too. Is it's not a guaranteed release. If for some reason the host, which is me, or you decides like, hey. I don't know, something didn't sit right. I had an interview once where a guest made a claim that later on I was like, hey, I can't release this episode because I don't agree with this at all. So yeah. And then my thing too is I actually never reach out to guests really. I'm at the point I just have guests reach out to me, because it's been a steady pace. But if I reach out to a guest, because you got denied. For me, it's like, well, what do you mean you're not a good fit for the show? Obviously, I wouldn't have reached out to you if I thought you were a bad fit for the show, right? Like, why would I reach out to you? Like, oh, this person would be a terrible guest. Let me take my time and energy to reach out and invite them on the podcast. Like, no, obviously, I read through your profile and I think there's a place for you here. And I guess sometimes I've had it too where people were like, I don't know if I'd be a good fit for the show. And it's usually misperceptions. I've had some guests who thought the show was military only or focused on this subject only or limited to this subject only. I'm like, no, I wouldn't have reached out to you and asked you to be on the show if I thought you were a bad fit. I don't know if that's kind of what went through your mind during your thing as well.
Yeah, I've had people do that to me too, where, I reach out and they're like, no, I don't think I'd be a good fit. And I thought, I didn't reach out for no reason. You know, I, the good thing about, I know a lot of podcasts have the particular niches of like, oh, this is only about mental health. This podcast really was like open to anything. I mean, you can come on like a typical recording. Like I had one recording day that was so Kate random of how random the conversation is. I can have a firefighter come on. I could have someone that's a doctor come on, someone that's like a saxophone operator, and then like a person that's like religious and stuff. That's how diverse my podcast is. So, I feel like people that would open the door for more people to come be like more open and comfortable to come on because of how diverse it is. But I have had that in experience of, that is don't feel like they're a good fit for the show. You reach out and they don't even give you like a dedicated like I don't know if that is immediately or like pass on you. And I'm just like, it hurts because I get a lot of passes too. And I don't know if it's just like one thing that I have suspected is, they look at my profile and they see like 469 interview like reviews. And then they go over to my podcast and they see like 100 episodes released. So I don't know if that's like a correlation of
Hmm.
like, I don't know if that's maybe, and if that's on my behalf, that's a lesson I need to learn from too. I don't know if that's what people are. are going based off of. I don't know. I'm not their brain, but I have had people that, I reach out because I feel like everyone has a story, and I 100% agree with you too about the promotion thing. I don't mind people coming on here to promote a product, but like I just don't want you to come on here and be like, this is the product I sell, this is what we do. I want to hear like the backstory of like how did this company come to be? How did this like product brand? I want to hear like the backstory of like the making process of it, the launch of it, all this stuff too. And I have had just guests come on here, and I've recently now gotten a lot of emails. Now I used to not get a single email for people reaching out to me, and I'm just like, how'd you find my email? Because I don't. The only place I really publicly say that is on my description box too. So I remember the first email I got from a guest. I was like, I'm popular now. It was just like I
Mm.
made it. Now I'm not getting all my messages through PodMatch. I've had some emails seem a little advertising, like promotion,
Hmm.
and
Yeah, same.
I'm an automatic no on those because I can be like, it just sounds like you really are just promoting a product to. So I
Yeah.
have passed on a few emails, and emails too are also sketchy because
Hmm.
I have really loved and enjoyed what Alex does for PodMatch. There's some minor tweaks that I wish he would fix personally that I have actually reached out to him for, of like, I think this would be better for the platform. I love PodMatch to death. I mean, it's a great platform. I love what he does. I'm on their legacy team. I'm all buddy. It's like I'm like buddy buddies with him and all this stuff. They've been really good for my show and for what they do for me. They've been really, really beneficial. And they've been really good people to work with. They and everyone I know really likes it. I think every podcaster that's on PodMatch really does loves the product just from what I've seen. I just kind of there's some things I wish they could change too
Mm.
about it, for that as well. When you're doing like doing interviews outside of Podmatch is a little challenging too, because Podmatch has that great tool of being able to schedule. You can put a link in there, and kind of going back of one thing, a lot of podcasters that I know that I've been a guest on, they don't really update the PodMatch link in there. There's like a thing that puts like release link. I've noticed a lot of podcasts on there don't do that. I've
Right.
noticed.
And there's no way
Um,
to really hold them accountable. Like you can message them and say, hey, like you never shared the link, and that's confirmation that we did it and that's important. And it's like some of them unfortunately are gone too. Like I've had plenty of people like they have their account for like 3 days and then they're gone. Or they do the free trial, or they have an assistant get it and then they're gone. And I hate that too. Yeah, I would say that's one of the things that needs to be fixed. And I've caught up on that too, is people won't update the link. And it even gives you reminders and everything like, hey, make sure you put in this link.
yeah, I've had that problem with reviews too, of just like people leaving like a review. I mean, you don't want to sound pushy to where it's like you're banging and bending, because I know some people on like these podcasters that are like these top podcasters too on Podmatch, and no disrespect to them, they have good shows, but they kind of get pushy on like reviews, and you have to do it in that moment. It's like, can you go leave me a 5-star review right now? And it's just like, let me log in. Hold on, wait a minute. You're just it's just like this awkward thing, you don't want to be that kind of host that's wanting to basically beg for that. Because
Mm.
I think honestly for podcasters too, that's kind of the secret to how you get paid is if they complete the interview. I mean, that's kind of the secret to Podmatch about getting paid. That's kind of how it works for us like podcasters, how we make kind of how we are able to use the platform, and kind of one of the things that we do. And it's only respectful if I leave a review, you leave a review as well. I've had so many not leave a review, and it's like, how do you appropriately tell them to leave a review without being pushy, kind of like acting like a a diva trying to get like attention. And it's like I've had trouble trying to word that too. I've also had people difficulty trying to persuade people to even try PodMatch because of how pricey it is. Like, and this is kind of a thing that I brought up to them just the other day about. I emailed them and I said, I think a lot more people would be likely and open to try PodMatch if there wasn't kind of like that huge divisive range and price between hosting and guesting. Like those every I've had like for the book podcast in particular, when I started posting the book podcast about 2 or 3 weeks ago, I've had so many people reach out to me and they were like, this looks like such a great platform. It's just too high for me. And I looked at them and I said, I don't blame you for that. I understand that it's a high thing, like it's money that you're wasting to like out a product that you don't know if it's going to really be beneficial. So, I that's one of the big things for me personally. What I think, what I would wish that they would change would be like lowered pricing for the
Mm.
memberships and stuff on there because I think a lot more people would want to sign up and try it out if they knew that it would be beneficial and be cheaper. But that's kind of personal critique that I have for them. But other than that, they're such a great company. It's just, there's some minor things like I don't know if for you too. I reached out to them about like a tech error. I thought it was just something on my end, but on my reviews, for all these reviews that, for podcasts have thousands of reviews, you only can see like the first 20 pages of them. If you click like see all reviews, it stops at like 20.
Mm.
I've reached out to them on that and they are not really, they've told me that they'd look into it, but I've not really seen a fix in it. I don't know if you've experienced that or know what I'm talking about, but it's like people can only see like I think the furthest people can see now is like back in January of this year, and
Mm.
that's just like a handful of them. And so I don't know. There's just some minor tweaks that they need to fix, but it's yeah, some people they get so much and they have to do so much that understand that they have a full business and they have so much that they have going on between
For sure.
interviews themselves and business meetings, having to go to events and sponsors, and they've got so much going on. But I don't know. I really wish that they would fix the review page too, to where you can see like
Mm.
reviews all the way back. Because I'd like to see like reviews from like my first interview, and I can't see that anymore.
Mm. For me, I'll be honest, I couldn't care less about my reviews on PodMatch because that is only PodMatch specific. For me, it's more important about what reviews I get on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, on those really big public platforms where the listeners are. Because when it comes to PodMatch, I mean, really, I haven't seen any bad reviews, maybe a few. And to be honest, when I book a guest or vice versa, I really don't care as long as their content is good and we're going to be a good fit. I mean, I suppose it's only in a case, it has to be an extreme case. If I'm about to guest with someone and there's a review, frequent no-show or low response rate or a 1 star review or a 2 star. I've really never seen less than 5 or 4 stars on PodMatch because most of the people who are using it got it to streamline their podcast guesting or hosting, and they're pretty committed. Like I said, the only time I really have an issue is if it's a third party company representing someone who don't even know they're on PodMatch, which I've had that chuckle as well because I had someone and I said, yeah, I got you through PodMatch. Make sure you go back in and release the episode link. And they're like, what's PodMatch? I'm like, you have a profile or texting me on it, So I've had those same
Right.
situations. It's like, you don't even
Mm,
know what platforms your agent is using. And like, that's important to know because what if they're on a website, which I couldn't think of one, but what if they're on like a bad website or a website that is not good for your reputation or is not in line with your company? Not that there's a lot of guesting websites that are bad, but you get the
mm,
gist of that. As far as the
yeah.
pricing point, I would say when you do a good quality and amount of interviews, the price point is covered. Maybe not each month, depending how many interviews you do, but you also got to think. the money that goes in all goes out. PodMatch has made over $1 million back to small independent podcasters. It's one of the only platforms that does it. And if you lower
Hmm.
that price point, that means each person is going to get paid less per interview. So then your money that you're making from it is going to go down, and that incentive goes down to a degree. So I think the pricing point for how much software there is and how streamlined it is pretty awesome. And then, as a PodMatch network member, you get a lot of great information. I think I pay the most expensive one because I both guest and host, and I think you're probably the same way. I think
Yeah.
that's the most expensive plan if you're both guesting and hosting, which sometimes I'm like, do I even care about guesting anymore that I want to pay for it? Because I have found that guesting on other podcasts, it's so hit or miss with the fruitfulness of that. But I also am a man who believes firmly in you never know what episode is going to reach someone. So any opportunity that is aligned with you, you should take. I believe, to be honest, if we're going to talk specifically about your podcast and why people are saying they're not a good fit, I think it's a very shallow reason. I think people see your podcast logo and title and they automatically assume, oh, this is a really far right political show, or this is a redneck show, or this is whatever preconceived notion they have, because I've had the same thing obviously with podcast being called Couple of Nukes, and the picture of it obviously I had the subtitle, rebuilding our dreams, rebranding our lives, and it's mental health and self-improvement. But I've had people be like, hey, it seems like military only. And I think it's very shallow to look at your podcast logo, Lethal Venom, or mine, Couple of Nukes, and be like, oh, I assume it's this or that. I'm not a good fit. It's like, well, did you actually read what the show is about? And for me,
Right.
honestly, if you're not going to take the time to read what the show is about and you're going to off the bat say, hey, I'm not a good fit, then you're not the kind of person I want to work with anyway, because that's so shallow. Like I don't expect you to listen to the podcast, right? And I always love when a guest comes on and they're like, hey, I've listened to the show and I actually mean it because I've gotten some emails. You talk about getting the emails. I've had some emails that were made up. I don't know if you've gotten this, Dear Epic Podcaster. Once AI really took off, so many emails suddenly changed to Dear Epic Podcaster, and I knew that it was just like AI generated because no guest was calling me Epic Podcaster. And then really as AI boomed, suddenly I'm getting 10 emails a week, Epic Podcaster. Where did this come from? It's not that I became an Epic Podcaster. It's just that it became a pitching style. But I had someone reach out and said, Mr. Whiskey, we really loved, your episode with Susie Q on, you know, mental echo chambers of self-limiting beliefs or whatever. Completely made up episode and guest. Never happened on my show. Or I had someone reach out. I really liked your 500th episode. I'd love to be 501. And I was like, I don't even have 500 episodes out. It's like the worst is when their pitch doesn't even, it's not even backed up, historically or logically. It's like, how are you going to pitch to be on the show? Or say you listen to this episode. And some people say, oh, and I doubt they listen to it because a lot of times they'll say, oh, your recent episode ABCXYZ. And it's just they grab the title of a recent episode. Sometimes they'll even have AI talk about it, but you can tell if they actually listen to it or not because you'll be like, it's just from the show notes. Like that's literally just copy paste for the show notes. And
Mhm.
I'm not one of those people who have gone farther. And I've worked with some podcasters who have gone farther and been like, tell me what you like about the episode. Or the best was, I think a gentleman I heard did an interview with the assistant of someone who had passed away. Yeah, and let's say it was like Michael Jackson, and it said an interview with Michael Jackson, blah blah blah. And this person was like, "I really loved your episode with Michael Jackson. It was so insightful." They said this, and the podcaster was like, "Well, Michael Jackson's dead." That was an interview with his assistant, and we called it an interview with Michael Jackson because she shared us personal insight. But like, you don't even know Michael Jackson is dead, and it wasn't him, but it was some famous person. So stuff like that, and I think that goes all down to like how people respect us as a platform and as a person and a professional. And, sometimes we're judged preemptively because of our podcast logos or our titles or these preconceived notions of what our show is. I've had products reach out. I think it just because it's kind of funny. I think I had a person reach out just to promote boner pills on my podcast, and they try to tailor it like, not being able to get it up can lead to mental health issues in your mental health podcast. I was like, but it was like so strongly just like please, these boner pills, they're made from plant fusion medicine and they really get it up. And like it's important. And I was like, but it was clearly like, yeah, and you know, sexual frustrations and mental health are real issues, but the way it was pitched was so much like but one of those things like make sure you say the product name this many times and show it like this and that. And do you want us to send you a free sample?
Oh God.
I should have said, yeah, let me get one of those just in case I have a rainy day. But yeah, so it's definitely been a journey. But what I want to switch to before we wrap up here really is of the one of the reasons I called you on to catch up over this past year was your new podcast, which aren't necessarily new, but kind of a rebirth of some old projects you had going on. And I know you had I saw you post promotion those for them, looking for guests, kind of relaunch these. Tell us about those.
So the one that kind of had took has kind of taken the new crown has been the book podcast. I started doing, of course, when I did the interview, Southern Reads was already out at that time, but it was kind of gone into dormant just due to Lethal Venom's unexpected success of how well it was. I wanted to, for one of my things this year of trying to be a serious podcaster and, really want to do this full time was I wanted to have a little bit more of a balance between all three podcasts. So I decided to kind of relaunch it. I launched some solo episodes of the book podcast, and then I think I went on to, I'm trying to think, LinkedIn, I think was the first place I went, or Instagram too, and it said, "Hey, I have this podcast out. If you want to be a guest on there, just let me know." I put the book podcast also on PodMatch too, just as like kind of like a guesting profile that make a or hosting profile that make a guest profile and all that, and just to see, test the waters to see like I'm gonna put it on here. I'm not gonna message anyone. I just kind of want the people to find the podcast and just find me first and to see how well it does and getting viewed and see how well it does in the algorithm. Well, I think about 10 people reached out to me like first day, which was shocking because Lethal Venom actually didn't get that kind of recognition at first. So it was kind of like a hmm. So I did some interviews and I've met some amazing people through the book podcast as well. They've actually been sending me books in the mail too, which has been
Oh yeah.
something that that uh I dreamed of, is like getting like PR packages, that's like anything like, oh, am I going to have like a PR package? So I've really been really beneficial by having them send me books. I don't, these have been books I don't ask, I tell them in emails now, if you want to send me anything, you can, but I don't give them my address. I wait till them for them to be like, yeah, I'll send you something. What's your address? So I usually just wait for them. And, they've sent me some other books, which is an honor. Most people would not be able to get that. Um, since then, I've had actually had one author that I really loved reading reach out to me, or I emailed them. I thought, oh, they'll never see it. Emailed me back. She was like, yeah, I'll do it. And I was like, thought, wait a minute. I about fell out of my chair from a heart attack. So I think she's coming on either next week or the week after next. So next week or two, she'll be on. But it just was shocking. And I've had a newfound audience from that too. It's just been crazy how PodMatch really has helped my podcasting journey too. A lot of my numbers started kind of going up on like literally this was the book podcast without posting for a long time. It'd be like occasional like uptake, but first day I posted it was like, phew, and it was just like people started recognizing it. They're really showing that they're listening to it and they're knowing what it's like. So it's just been a second successful thing that's happened, and it's just like it's crazy to think like I do this for a living. I think some people get like are having such a hard time with jobs and everything now, and it's kind of selfish to think that, you just sit home like you and me do. You get to travel and you've done so much, and that's from you've done the podcast longer than I have. There's a lot of these veteran podcasts that have been on for years and years, and they get to do all this traveling and stuff. I saw that you recently were going back on your cruise, and you're newly engaged, and I knew that was kind of different. You and your wife were going now on a cruise together for podcasting events, like
Oh
you
yeah.
did, like I've heard before. Um, so that's kind of there's still dreams of that, but this was kind of like a second launch. So it's been doing really well. I actually did like a full week launch of it with just doing book interviews. I didn't do anything for Lethal Venom, nothing for that podcast, I think, other than one interview that was already scheduled. But it was a successful week, and it's just kind of a new thing now. I'm balancing two podcasts at once, but been kind of doing that new method of not doing a lot of editing, and I feel so much more relaxed doing that.
Right. Yeah, for sure. And where do you see kind of along the same lines the future going? Any big projects in the work that you're really excited for with the podcast or anything else? Now that you've, got the journalism degree and the podcast going, are you going to start a journalism podcast? Are you looking to try to work for like a news company or be independent? What kind of are the goals shaping up to be as we approach, because I just turned 24 this year as well. You and I are approaching the quarter life crisis. So it's like, oh no, what are we doing?
Well, you know, as I think I said in our first interview, this was not the plan. This was not where I thought
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
went to school for 4 years, have a bachelor's degree in journalism. I'm doing podcasting from home. That's just not, I thought this would be like a side gig. I'd post an episode here, wouldn't post another one for a few months. I just don't really plan for anything. There's still a lot of goals and dreams of what I want. I'd love to have a podcast studio. There's some podcasting things
Hmm.
behind the scenes that I
Yeah.
would like to upgrade to, and be able to just upgrade, but I know that will come with time. It's just going to take a lot of hard work to get there. Being able to go to traveling for interviews too. I think what you're doing of, being able to go and traveling, something I really would like to do. Um, Go to some podcasting events. There's just minor things like that I'm really looking forward to. But it's just kind of like being like the high top thing podcast where you have like celebs come on. That's always I think everyone's goal in life when you're a podcaster is to have that. So that's just kind of a dream. But just living day by day of just growing the podcast, just taking it step by step and living through it. But it's hard to say where I'll be next year. I don't know. Um, as for projects, I don't really have any like projects really that I've not mentioned that are on there. I think since we talked the website now, which is crazy that I
Yes.
now
Woo.
have an official website. I'm official on that. So that was kind
I
of
feel
like
you on that. I never
that was
thought
kind
I'd
of
have
one
a
of the big
website.
checklists. That was kind of a big checklist for me for the podcast was the website. I thought, okay, that was one big mark that I can check off. So, I don't know. It's just I'm open to opportunities. If there's an opportunity to work for a news company, I'll take it. I just really have loved podcasting. I feel like I really would like to just do career in podcasts, and everyone's like, this was just meant for you. They said you're so good at what you do. This was what you were meant to do, and I'm like, yeah, but it just wasn't the plan. But so a lot of people have said, I think you were built for that. I can see you doing that. So they're just like, just take it, just go with it, run with it, and see what happens. And it's been paying off. So
Yeah.
I don't really see any stopping and doing it. So I'll be 60 years
100%.
old.
100%.
No,
Yeah, but by that time the microphone and will be inside of our brain and everything, right? We just live
oh,
stream to
who
people's
knows?
brains and all that stuff we say. But I think what's really interesting, I don't know if I'd want lethal venom in my brain. No, no offense, it's like, hold on, mom, I'm live streaming some lethal venom into my brain. It's like that's what these kids do nowadays. But yeah, jokes aside, I
Ooh.
think like you've mentioned. when I first started podcasting, I didn't see becoming an international speaker and comedian, speaking on stage in different countries. Like I just won an award the other night here in Japan. I showed up, gave an improv speech on mental health and rainy weather and won an award. Like that was not the plan. When I first started a podcast, it was every few weeks, it was a hobby, and it ended up going full time. And definitely want to meet you in person, whether I, go to where you are or if I meet you at Podfest, Podcast Movement, some kind of podcasters gathering, whatever it is. I know we'll meet in due time, do some in-person content. But yeah, I had the same dream, of course, of having a nice studio set up. Here in Japan, I just have curtains behind me, and when I'm not in Japan, I have a green screen, which is fine. But having that nice look with the neon sign and custom made, all that stuff you've talked about, the upgrades over time, they'll come with time, the merch and everything. I'm excited for my Lethal Venom t-shirt whenever it comes out,
Oh
that kind of
Lord.
stuff. Yeah. Like, those just
Yeah.
small but personally meaningful accomplishments, getting the new microphone. I like this is such an upgrade from what I used to have. And, it's a small thing, but to us, it's like, wow, it's super awesome. So, yeah, speaking opportunities, in-person events, I've gotten to meet a lot of my guests in real life, just grab lunch or dinner with them. Super cool. Sometimes record an in-person podcast, that's the awesome
Yeah.
part. My personal recommendation to would be go to high schools or other places once you have a really established show like you do and say, hey, I have a journalism degree. I'm a podcaster. I'm recognized top of the charts or whatever it is. And I'd love to start a podcast program at your school to teach about podcasting is the new wave of journalism. People trust podcasts more than news channels. I'd love to start a mentorship program or a podcast program. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that like I didn't think of when I first started podcasting. And I went to a school, talked to them. They're like, hey, do you want to come? I was like, I'd like to speak on stage about, mental health and bullying and stuff, really important. They said, would you be willing to come back once a week and teach from your podcast, mentorship and different stuff to the students? And then we were talking about having me zoom in some of the guests from my podcast who are, great educational value. And I was like, okay, did not see this route. So it takes us to places we don't expect, to people we don't expect. Having a celebrity, I've had some, celebrities on my podcast since EJ Snyder, 6 times naked and afraid champion, like people I would have never expected. America's youngest and first flight instructor to fly a single engine airplane across the Atlantic Ocean. Like I've met some voice actors. Like I've met the voice actor of Ash from Pokemon. Like you go into these conferences and podcasting, you never know who you're gonna meet. And sometimes they reach out to you first, and you're like, me, little old me, So
Yeah.
yeah, I'm excited to see the future. You said you don't know where you'll be a year from now. I think you're gonna be on this podcast a year from now, depending how you grow, over 1,000 episodes, and whatnot. But
Oh
I'm
Lord.
excited to see where you're going and where I'm going. And for anyone listening, I hope this has been encouraging to you to maybe start a podcast if you've had cold feet or hesitation around it. It's easy to do. Don't be scared like it's gonna grow into this uncontrollable thing that takes over your life. You are solely in control. Like Mr. May and I set the pace. We record as much as we want or as little as we want. We post as frequently as we want. You know, find your cadence, find your calling. But if you're thinking about starting a podcast, yeah, we've promoted a lot. PodMatch, not a paid promotion for us. We actually have really benefited from the service. But if you're not for that, there are free guesting matching softwares. They're not as good, I'll be honest. I've used them. They're not as good, but there are other options, so don't think that this is something that's really expensive to do or difficult to do. You don't have to have our conversations. You could be a 15-minute podcast, a 20-minute podcast, whatever you want. But I hope that we have encouraged you in some way. And Mr. May, of course, we're gonna have that brand new website link in the description below. Everyone go show some love to that website. And of course, your different podcasts will be there. People will be free to reach out to you to guest, of course, or contact or collaborate with you in whatever way. But thanks for coming
Mm.
back on the show, just catching up and seeing. And once you're a featured author in those books that come out, definitely let me know so we can promote those and everything else going on.
I definitely will. I appreciate you for reaching out to me again. As I told him before, he's the first podcast that I've been a guest on that's actually reached back out and been like, "Hey, I want you to come back." So I really appreciate you for being the first. And yeah, I really enjoyed coming back. So thank you again for having me.